what DraftKings does is it offers daily and weekly fantasy sports contests across 10 professional sports. These include the NFL, NBA, NHL, golf, soccer, and many more. For those of you not familiar with fantasy sports, the idea is that you create your fantasy team out of players based on a salary cap format. The salary usually does not exceed $50,000, which means that you have to be very strategic because each player costs a different amount. You then acquire points based on each athlete's in-game performance. Whoever has the most points wins the game. I'm sharing this because it's important to know this background information for this challenge. For the past few months, we've had a lot of amazing teams that have compiled and created either a game for the sport that DraftKings does not offer. Some of these include tennis, Counter-Strike, cricket, or rugby. Or they've created a new game style for an existing sport on DraftKings platform. The finalists were narrowed to 3 from over 25 submissions. These 3 will be presenting in front of you today and are all here, so we're incredibly excited. Why don't we give a round of applause for the teams that have made it this far? So there was a lot of criteria used to judge these teams, but the 4 that really kind of were key were the innovation and ambition behind the idea, the product's user interface and user experience, the overall quality of the product, and finally, the overall impact that the product will have. The winners, who will be announced live following this presentation right here in this room, so you'll all get to see that, will receive the following. The first place winners will get $2,000 as a team cash prize, plus an internship with DraftKings, and lunch with DraftKings CEO Jason Robbins, who will be presenting here later today as well. The second prize winner will get 4 tickets to a basketball or baseball game, plus $500 as a cash prize. And finally, the third place team will get 4 tickets to a basketball or baseball game and $250 as a cash prize. We have an amazing set of judges here to help us judge and evaluate which teams are going to win, and they're sitting all right here, and I want to introduce to them quickly. So I'll ask each judge to stand as I introduce you. The first judge is Mark Narenberg, VP of Game Operations and Development at DraftKings. Why don't we give Mark a round of applause? Second judge is Ben Shields, Senior Lecturer at MIT Sloan School of Management, and actually my communications professor. So let's give Ben a quick round of applause. Third is Greg Karamitis, Senior Vice President of Product Management at DraftKings. And finally, last but not least, we have Ben Alamar, Director of Analytics at ESPN. So are you guys ready to see the first presentation? Ready to see what the first team pulled together? All right, so let's pull up from the University of Chicago Masters of Analytics program. Please welcome Gregory Bernstein to the stage.
All right, glad that's my presentation. Okay, welcome to my presentation on fantasy tennis. So just starting with a high-level overview of how this concept will work. Before tennis tournament starts, we're going to have a draft, and contestants will bring players onto their roster with a salary cap restriction. They will then score points based on their match result, certain statistics, and how well they do in the tournament, and the DraftKings contest will last for the duration of the tennis tournament. So 2 weeks for a Grand Slam, 1 week for a non-Grand Slam. All right, looking at salary cap and some of our roster requirements here, you'll notice that contestants will only be able to draft the first or second ranked player, or both the third and fourth ranked player. What we want to notice is the top-heavy pricing structure of the player pool. Most of the value in tennis is at the top of the field. There's a much bigger difference between, say, the top 5 and the next 5 players than, say, the 60th and the 70th ranked players. So we want the pricing structure to reflect that, and it should be much more exponential, especially towards the top, rather than following a linear pattern. One of my favorite aspects of this contest is the flexibility we're allowing in roster size. So contestants, as you see, we're permitting them to draft between 6 to 8 players. So this adds a very stimulating strategic element to the pool. Almost all contestants will draft 1 or 2 of the top players. But how will they fill the rest of those roster spots? Should they draft 2 or 3 middling players who maybe have some experience before? Or should they throw a bunch of wild cards on there and hope they go on an unexpected run? Looking at the scoring here, this is going to be for a Grand Slam men's event. We remember we're scoring for 3 main categories: match result, certain statistics, and how far players advance in a tournament. What we want to notice here is the scoring system is designed to be rewarding rather than punitive. We're going to reward points for every set won, which gives more players a chance to score more on every roster. And it'll keep viewers interested in matches, especially early on in the tournament, when the eventual winner of the match might be fairly evident. If we look at our statistics, these also reinforce that concept of keeping the viewer interested. We want to award points for things like winners and aces that are both easy to track and easy to observe. By including double faults in the scoring, we're able to capture that possibility of a negative event occurring, which does add a layer of excitement, kind of like fumbles and interceptions do in football. However, we don't want to include something like unforced errors, because that's just too much negative reinforcement. We don't want contestants worrying every time their player on their roster hits the ball in the net if that's going to count against them or not. Finally, it's important we reward points for the most important thing in a tennis tournament, advancing through the rounds and eventually potentially winning. So these round bonuses are designed to place an emphasis on that without rendering the rest of the contest meaningless. So you'll see they give people who have these players on their roster a nice advantage, but nothing too much. We don't want like a 300-point bonus for having the champion on your roster, because then you would never be able to do well without that player on your roster. All right, one of the best things about fantasy tennis is it's flexible in its structure. So I think the most popular format for these events will be the guaranteed prize pool, top-heavy payout, large field events, as they are with most sports. And by capping the entries at 5, we allow the prize pool to grow, but we prevent a saturation of too many repeated lineups occurring. However, there's nothing in the structure of the draft or the way the sport is played that prevents variation. We can have large field events with single entry or unlimited entry. We can have more of the field paid out, such as in the 50-50 or the multiplier payout structure, or we can have smaller events like heads-up competition. The same thing goes for our variations on the draft. We can hold new contests after the first or second round of the tennis tournament is completed with a brand new draft and totally new player pricing and salary cap based on how the tournament's gone so far. We can also move away from the salary cap format and use a tier structure where every tennis player will be placed into a tier before the tournament begins, and then contestants will have to draft one player from each tier to make up their roster. We can also have contests with rosters of only men's players, rosters of only women's players, and mixed rosters as well. And this is really nice because we're able to offer a different variant to contestants without any of the operational difficulty or headaches of creating a new draft or a new salary cap structure. We just take the men's and women's roster, put them together, and you have a whole new contest. So I'd just like to wrap up by saying that tennis really is an ideal fantasy sport. It has a long season, so there's opportunity for contests throughout the year. And it's a global sport with international superstars, so it really gives DraftKings the potential to tap into markets that aren't currently being reached. But most importantly, tennis is an individual sport. I think one of the biggest conflicts for sports fans out there is balancing the interest in supporting their favorite team and supporting the players on their fantasy roster. So, your favorite team's up by 7 at the 2-minute warning, and you want them to run the ball to win the game, but you got the quarterback on your roster, so you want him to throw one more touchdown pass. There's a contradiction there. But in tennis, that does not exist. It's all about rooting for players, and the goals of winning the tennis match are always going to be aligned with accruing points on the fantasy roster. I think it's a natural attraction here for both the traditional sports fan and the fantasy enthusiast, and I think that's what gives this idea so much potential. So thank you, and I'll just mention we have some further scoring and statistical analysis in the appendix if we want to reference that, and happy to answer any questions, obviously.
Thank you, Greg. Judges, you have 5 minutes to ask questions.
Yes?
So for the statistics, statistics like winners and unforced errors, it's going to be an advantage to play as many points as possible, which might reward players for going to, say, 7-6 instead of just sweeping. What do you think about that?
I think that's a point of interest for sure. You'll see in the scoring that I didn't explicitly point out, but there's a bonus awarded for winning in straight sets and for winning without losing serve. So that is designed to almost counteract that effect in a way.
Is there a bonus for going like 6-0 versus 6-4? 6-4 would get you more points, right?
That's true, yeah. So currently the way it's designed, I don't have it like that. I think it's better to, well, there's two sides to it. One, I think more scoring is better. So giving the chance to kind of the person, what you're doing is you're rewarding the 4 games as well. It falls in line with the concept of rewarding points for just winning a set. So kind of all of your points want to recognize. And then I think the other thing is there's also something to be said for it's trickier to win a 6-4 set in a lot of ways or a 7-6 set than a 6-0 set. So I think getting more points for that isn't necessarily a bad thing.
Is there any thought with your roster flexibility in terms of numbers of athletes to letting people hold open some roster slots and salary cap space to later on during the tournament as the prices go up, obviously, but add an additional player, so particularly so you can stay engaged if all your players have just been bounced out of the tournament?
Yeah, I think that's a good idea. I think it's you'd really have to charge a premium for that because I think there's a huge advantage even just to seeing one round. Even just if I have an 8th seed in the top half of the draft, even if he's not due to play a Federer maybe till the semifinals, but if Federer were to lose in that first round, that's just such a huge advantage to get that information. So I think that would be an interesting possibility to allow because we do want to keep people engaged if they have a really bad start. But there'd have to be a premium, and I think in general it works better kind of separating the contest to before and after.
Was there any thought in including just games won as a statistic, so that you do reward a player if they are actually having a competitive match versus just getting blown out 6-0?
Yeah, I think that's a good idea. I think that's covered in the sense that they're earning the statistical points for that scoring. Not always, obviously, but chances are if they win 4 games, they will be getting more points than winning 0 games. And then as far as the structure of the sport, winning sets is really more important. I know that seems obvious, but I mean, just winning sets is more of a solid achievement. And when you win a set, it's kind of the whole game resets, and you start over again. And that's like it's almost like you've won a mini match. Whereas just to win a game is kind of a little too micro, I think.
Did you think about a format that is not the entire tournament? And what were your thoughts on that?
Yeah, my thoughts on that are that I think while daily fantasy is not impossible with tennis, I just think a longer tournament structure fits it a lot better. If you have a daily competition, there's a few issues. One is when there's more matches in the tournament, which you need for a daily fantasy competition on one day, the matches are less competitive. It's the first round, it's more apparent who will win. You get later in the tournament, matches get better. They're not as competitive. And I think the other thing is, if that situation arises, you're choosing between who's going to hit more winners, right? Federer or Nadal. It kind of is it's not really in the nature of the game. And I know I'm a big tennis fan. I wouldn't really enjoy tuning into a match knowing that I have no stake moving forward, that I'm just picking the biggest server and hope he hits a lot of aces. Whereas if it's totally different, if I have Federer on my roster and I'm kind of sweating him in a first round match, knowing I have that stake moving forward, and then kind of enjoying that statistical observance is a nice side effect.
Gotcha. Just one extra question for me.
Yeah, for sure.
Did you consider what do you think the actual market size here is, given sort of the overall size of the daily fantasy market, and obviously NFL is just wildly popular in the U.S. relative to other sports.
Yeah.
And this is also, as a weekly format, you're not getting a large number of start times. How big do you think this could be?
Yeah, great question. If I were to give you like a percentage or something, I'd just be guessing, so I won't do that. But what I will say is I think in established markets, particularly the United States, this will have traction amongst. It'll kind of be a niche thing. It'll be a small portion of the market. But I think where there is potential is in those countries where there's not a lot of action right now, and DraftKings might not even be yet. There are a lot of tennis fans, especially in European countries. And at the same time, the kind of global shift of the NFL and the NBA is on the up. So you get these people who will be introduced to fantasy through this. They're also hearing about the NFL and the NBA through different mediums, and I think that has huge potential to then bring them in, and they would eventually become more of those mainstream sports players. Okay, good. All right, thank you.
Yeah,
Thanks,
thank
guys.
you, Gregory.
No problem.
Awesome job, Gregory. Thank you so much. So we're going to call up our second team from MIT Sloan's own School of Management. Please welcome Della Gaborzo and Garrett Schreiber.
Hi, everyone. I'm Garrett Schreiber.
I'm Della Gaborzo.
We've been playing fantasy sports for over 15 years, and we're excited to share with you our proposal for Own the Headset.
Now imagine, it's an autumn Sunday afternoon, 4:25 p.m. Pat's game's just about to start, and we're all watching the game together with friends. Right now, we have Zach, 26 years old. He plays fantasy sports from time to time, but daily fantasy isn't just really his thing. And we have Alyssa, who's 28 years old, has been playing fantasy sports in our office pool, but just never really got into daily fantasy. So what do we think we should do? It's time to own the headset.
So quite simply, players win cash prizes for correctly predicting the outcome of NFL plays in real time. You can think of it as HQ trivia, but for the NFL. So how does this actually work? In Own the Headset, each contest is a specific quarter of an NFL game. When the quarter begins and the drive starts, every player is active. They have to correctly predict the outcome of each play in real time. When a player gets a play incorrect, they're eliminated from that drive. At the end of the drive, 1,000 points are allocated proportionally to the players based on how well they do compared to everybody else. When the next drive starts, all the players in the contest are active again, and the process continues. When the contest ends, or when the quarter in the NFL game ends, the person who has accumulated the most points wins the cash prize. So we believe the user interface should be clean and intuitive. We imagine at the top there would be a live game situation, and beneath that would be a play clock that shows how many seconds the player has left to make their prediction. Beneath that, we would have 4 simple choices that a player can guess: first down, short of first down, turnover, and offensive score. These 4 picks are simple and encompass all outcomes of a possible NFL play. We'd also include a scoreboard, both for the drive and for the contest itself, as well as a space for a chat room or advertisements.
So what do we think will happen? We think users will be blown away by the experience. First off, users will be able to experience being the coach, not just the GM like you normally get in daily fantasy. Second, users will be able to use the small bite-sized format that daily fantasy provides, but in a different format that brings on new users who just aren't usually used to daily fantasy. Also, it brings more power plays to the game because they'll be able to play on multiple screens. Also as well, that the user will be part of the massive online social community because they'll be able to play against office mates, teammates, friends at the bar. And then lastly, it's very difficult to predict each play and also each drive. So it gives people who are in last place a chance to get to the top. Oh, sorry, we also ran a pilot of this game. And we had a user who said that this felt like he was on the edge of his seat, that he just couldn't wait to the next play, and that unlike his normal fantasy rosters, which he sets it and forgets it, he actually was into the game and watched the game intently. So we think that users will evolve in a 4-down system. First down, they'll just play the game. Second down, they'll start using game theory tactics to try to outsmart one another because they want to get more points than the opponent. Third down, players will start understanding statistical probability and how the games actually work and turn into power players. And fourth down, those same power players will start researching games and understanding statistical probabilities before the games. Therefore, they'll be more prepared to make choices in the game. So, what does that mean for DraftKings? We think DraftKings will be well positioned to become an even more dominant player in daily fantasy sports. One, it'll introduce more new players to the game because they'll understand a different format than what they've perceived to be confusing at times. Second, improving mobile technology will give people the understanding of DraftKings being the leader in digital daily fantasy. Third, the new and innovative game, like I said before, brings more fans to the NFL that may not have been paying attention to the NFL before. And then lastly, the communal experience will give everybody the feeling that they're playing against friends, family, in a close setting.
So in addition to the variant of the game we just presented, we think it's really well positioned for significant expansion beyond just football. Most importantly, we think it plays well for baseball, golf, and other sports. Through our pilot test, we found out that it would be great benefit for players to have statistic packages at their fingertips, so that could be upsold as a premium product. We think it'd be awesome to have celebrities hosting game rooms with live video feeds to drive further traffic. We also think it makes sense to have tiered rooms based on skill level, as well as private rooms for friends and family to play. We also think DraftKings should host a game of the week, similar to Sunday Night Football or Monday Night Football, with higher payouts. With Own the Headset, we believe that DraftKings can elevate itself from the dominant player in daily fantasy to the MVP in mobile entertainment. And with that, we'd like to open it up to any Q&A.
Thank you. Thank you both for your work and for your presentation. You know, one of the things that's so interesting about video games is that each level you beat, you move on to another one with more challenges. I look at this and I say, wow, this could be really exciting for like a quarter. How do you think about sustaining player interest, not just throughout an entire game, but potentially throughout an entire season? How are you thinking about sustaining player interest in this new format?
Yeah, we think that's a good question. And so when we ran our pilot test, when we actually did it for an entire half, and granted it was friends who were playing it, so they're maybe a little bit biased, but people were sort of asking, like, could we do this again? Like, it had this addictive appeal to it. And also, to touch on that point, that's why some of the ideas we had in the last slide where, you know, DraftKings could host like a multiplier game or have celebrities sort of live feed video during the games. So it's more of an entertainment factor also, as opposed to just necessarily, oh, I'm playing this game and, you know, watching TV.
Jumping quickly before I pass it over. So great job, awesome presentation. One quick, very sort of nuanced question. So you had the countdown timer going on before you have to lock in your next play. Given that sort of the cadence between NFL plays can be wildly different, you can be a full 40 seconds or you could be the hurry up offense, get moving. How does that timer mechanic actually work?
Yeah,
Yeah.
you want to go? Yeah, so we'll show you. We actually have a slide in the appendix on that. So during our pilot, wait, don't show it up there. But during our pilot, we had the Rams versus Cowboys game week 4, and time between snap between plays was actually 33 seconds on average. So even during the hurry-up offense or such like that, on the average of the first half of the entire game, it didn't really make it didn't have really a large effect. But yes, you were correct. There are some plays where you have the hurry-up offense. So it can be adjusted to where the clock timer can maybe be 10 seconds, and then that's just a uniform standard. Like, it's adjustable. But yes, that was a concern we addressed.
Sort of in a similar technological issue, depending on how I'm watching the game, plays could have already happened before I see them. So how do you deal with somebody who's, you know, at the event and seeing things happen live versus somebody who's seeing them on maybe a 2-minute delay on the stream?
Yeah, so that component of this game is definitely the toughest technical aspect to this, but sort of what gave us comfort is you know, the amount of time that actually is between when the last play ends and when the next play begins. So, you know, I think it was like 80% of the plays had more than a 25-second gap. So even if you had to cut off when, you know, the users get to input the answer.
I mean, that helps, but like seriously, we have data flowing into our databases as before a play happens on a screen. So like the time between plays doesn't matter at that point.
Yeah, and another variant of the game that we consider is, do you just predict the outcome of the drive versus the outcome of the play itself? So that's definitely a point that we would have to flesh out fully with, you know, full data from ESPN and other things like that.
So if I understand right, you have to predict every single play for the quarter, and if you miss one, you're eliminated. Is that right?
You're eliminated for that drive. So you can sort of think of like each drive is its own mini game within the quarter.
I was going to
itself.
say, did you do any analysis on the odds of actually winning and making it through? But it's just you can't score more points on that drive, and then you're
exactly.
Is it a point per correct answer? Is that how the scoring works?
So you want to go to the point slide? Yep. So the way we have it right now is each drive is worth 1,000 points, and it's sort of based on your percentile finish in that drive. The 1,000 points gets divided up. So it's a little bit nuanced, but if you do way better than everyone else, you get a large share of the points.
Cool. Well, then I guess last thing, I'm not sure the exact 4 options, but I assume they're not equally likely, especially depending on the situation.
Correct.
Is there any incentive to be contrarian, or I'm trying to think if there'd be a reason. I guess yeah.
Yeah,
If you want to win, you're going to have to go against the obvious.
Exactly, and that leads to the game theory thought process.
Okay.
So there's also situations where if a team is first and down on the 20-yard line, and most people are selecting either it's going to be first down or not a first down, there are 20-yard touchdowns all the time. So it goes to like a little more high probability once you get closer to the end zone, but there's still a lot of game theory that's involved with how many points do you need, how likely is it.
Awesome. Impressive. You guys definitely thought through everything here.
Any questions?
So during your beta testing, being fully switched on for every play and sort of making that choice every time can be a little bit draining. I think just me and a friend have tried actually doing this for a quarter of a game, like similar things, right? And it's a ton of fun, but for a full quarter, that can be fairly exhausting. How did that go in your beta testing?
Yeah, so it was actually, we thought the same process, but actually it turned out to be opposite. So during the whole quarter, yeah, it was exciting, very fun. Obviously, there are bathroom breaks, so you take bathroom breaks. But during the commercial breaks, but during the whole thing, people just wanted more and more. They were already excited for the next play because we had the same thought process. We figured, you know what, they might be bored, lose interest, but every single play for every single drive for the first half, they were very engaged. So we feel that more and more of this, I think, with more testing, I think you would see the same thought process that we had people who hadn't played fantasy sports before or didn't know much about the game, felt like experts, it seemed, after the first half. So I feel that same type of network effect will happen over time.
Thank you.
Great job.
Thank you.
Thank you, Della and Garrett. So who's excited to see the last team? Yeah, we got some energy? All right. So we are going to bring up from the University of North Carolina's Keenan Flagler School of Business, Patrick Kurunwani, Brad Hoffman, and Robert Powell. So let's give them a big round of applause and get ready for the last presentation.
Like extra. That's right.
Hi, I'm Brad Hoffman.
Hi, I'm Patrick Kurunwani.
And I'm Robert Powell, and we're here representing the University of North Carolina, and we're introducing a new concept for DraftKings called Make or Break. We're proposing that DraftKings establish a new salary cap game that allows users to make a strategic decision, i.e. make or break, on projected players' fantasy points. We believe this game will not only have advanced user engagement through the excitement of it, but also has potential to capture a novel revenue stream through the data that will be acquired over time by observing how your players are making their decisions. We also believe that this has the opportunity to rapidly expand DraftKings' footprint into a key customer target base. And what is that customer target base? We believe that DraftKings should target the current US American sports gambler, of which there are 118 million current gamblers who spend around $380 billion a year. We think DraftKings, by implementing Make or Break onto their platform, will not only capture part of this 118 million, but also get a good portion of their $380 billion they're spending annually. To better visualize exactly what that means for DraftKings, we see their current market being the 18 million daily fantasy players, with a serviceable addressable market of the 57 million fantasy players in the United States. But by incorporating Make or Break onto the platform, you'll increase your total addressable market to 118 million US sports gamblers who are currently engaging in online gambling because of the opportunities and attributes and game styles that DraftKings doesn't currently offer, such as spread, money line, or over-under, which our game is based on. But there are risks associated with online gambling, each of which we believe DraftKings understandably mitigates and is different from. Overall, we believe that DraftKings is an opportunity here to capture a rapidly growing market while also maintaining their operational and legal differentiation.
So on our left, we have our present-day Peter. That's DraftKings' current customer. On our right, we have our sports betting Bobby. That's who we're trying to target. So at my time at Duke University, I played football, and me and my teammates, we were present-day Peters. We would like to play in daily fantasy sports. Every now and then, we throw a couple dollars in a pot just to make it a little bit more interesting. However, as we got older, we started to realize that we had more attributes that were very similar to the sports betting Bobby. That key attribute is that we found more utility in identifying misvalued sports outcomes that were coming out in these games. So essentially, our present-day Peter, they find more value in maximizing roster performance, whereas the sports betting Bobby finds more utility in finding misvalued players. So ultimately, we are trying to increase the perceived potential of both of these customer segments, as well as increasing their actual utility in the in-game experience. So you can see here that the way the DFS roster is very similar. Players are still making selections based on the matchup, their projection, as well as the salaries. However, what we're adding in is we're adding in a new experience where the actual player will have the ability to capitalize on a misvalued player. So for example, we have James Harden. He's valued at 56.2 points. We know he's playing at Dallas. Dallas plays great defense at home. We think he'll go under that. If he scores under, he'll get the 56.2 points. If he gets over 56.2 points, he'll lose that same amount. So 3 supplemental reasons why DraftKings should implement Make or Break. Number 1, the game variation is applicable across multiple sports, NFL, NBA, MLB, you name it. Number 2, the added layer of strategy will cause more differentiation in your picks, which will mitigate the actual ties you actually have. And finally, we want to utilize DraftKings' current infrastructure to play single lineups across multiple tournaments.
There are several potential possible risks that DraftKings may face when implementing Make or Break. The 2 biggest ones are low adoption rate, as well as a change in customer behavior. Since Make or Break is geared directly towards our target U.S. gambling customer base and has key attributes that they are accustomed to, we feel that DraftKings will be able to overcome this hurdle. In addition, with the change in customer behavior, as we're bringing in more customers, there's obviously the opportunity that customers may leave. However, by adding additional game variants to DraftKings, we feel as though DraftKings will be able to solidify itself as a one-stop shop for fantasy sports activists. In addition, we also know that there is potential legislation which may legalize online U.S. gambling. Should this happen, DraftKings will be in a prime position to leverage existing customers as well as customer data should they implement Make or Break. As you can see right here, we have our Make or Break projected financials. On the left, the revenue projections, and on the right, our revenue assumptions. We feel as though that DraftKings will be able to implement Make or Break as early as the 2018 NFL season, which would include part of the NBA season as well. There's 2 real customer bases that attribute to this revenue. This is the target customer base, the U.S. gambling customers, as well as the current DraftKings daily fantasy sports players who may spend an additional net revenue on this product. We feel as a total this is a great opportunity for DraftKings to add $480 million in value to the company. And in general, feel it's a great opportunity to leverage its existing platform to expand its footprint, gain revenue, and provide a great platform for its customers.
Take some questions.
Thank you.
Thank you for your presentation. Do you envision current daily fantasy basketball players on DraftKings also playing Make or Break? Is this sort of complementary to the current product offering, or could it cannibalize?
As you'll see kind of in our roster image here, we believe this can be an easy added-on decision to make while you're developing your roster. So as you put in a roster to maximize total potential in the traditional daily fantasy, we think you can also add this over-under Make or Break button to the end to also enter this roster in 2 different avenues. I think it's really exciting for any sort of basketball, football, or any sport because you can actually put a hedge against your current roster by actually shorting your own roster with this concept. So it's immediate benefit to DraftKings where people are entering in 2 different games, spending more money, but also it's more fun for the player to have the ability to hedge or short their own roster or double their chances of winning if they're really confident in the decisions they've made.
2 questions. One, Duke and UNC? How do you resolve that internal conflict?
We got Maryland and Virginia.
Yeah, all
well,
ACC
at least that's
guys.
2 different people. It's in one person. That's hard. Sorry. So you talk about sort of customer growth here. This feels like a fun, highly strategic game, which seems to be a more narrow set of customers and one that's already captured by the people that play DraftKings. Is it really something that has broader appeal than what DraftKings has right now?
Yeah, so currently right now, as we said with our sports betting Bobbies, that's the market we're trying to capture. Those are the people who are not playing daily fantasy sports because they don't see the resemblance in DFS. So what attracts the sports betting Bobbies is they like the ability to over or undervalue perceived, mistakes in outcomes, right? So in this case, when you're trying to pick an actual player, if you think that the player is misvalued either over or under from a valuation standpoint, that's the utility that they would have, and that's the customer base that we're trying to gather, people who are currently not using DFS because they don't have that simulation there.
And Ben, that's a great question. I think one of the things we like about this game is that you can maximize your potential by just picking the top 4 known players who have the highest value and not worry as much about the lower value. You're risking less by picking those lower projected points. You can pick James Harden, LeBron James, Steph Curry, all the people that people want to watch, and not have to worry about hitting it with those lower level roster like you do with a traditional sport. We think there's a real opportunity for the casual fan to enjoy this without having to know deep people on people's benches and rosters.
So there's a set, I'm just going to ask a couple questions. There's a set roster amount and a set budget. Did you guys consider any did you think about anything different than that?
We thought about, we really want to take a look at the data, I think, to really understand this. This is an existing platform. It resembles kind of what DraftKings and other daily fantasy sports have, and something that I feel users are accustomed to. And we feel as though this is a great opportunity to leverage that, but apply it in a different format where people, like we were talking about, identifying perceived mispricing.
Right. Just because theoretically it's a zero-sum game, so you could let people use whatever budget they want. Just a thought. But what was the other thing? Why'd you go negative instead of just points for getting it right and 0 for getting it wrong?
And we went back and forth on this a lot, and our big thought process was we thought about doing a differential, right? So if instead of losing 56.2 points, if you go over, you just lose the difference. One thing we thought about was the implementation cost. It would cost DraftKings to actually set up that kind of algorithm. But as far as this strategy right here, we believe it really makes the player really not only look into who's going to perform the best, but how well is their performance matched up against what they're actually projected to score.
Last thing, have you thought about the sweat experience following the standings at all? How you do that? Like, what players really don't get points until the end of their game, right? Unless they pass their threshold.
Yeah.
So, did you think about that at all?
We did, and that's one reason why we were kind of attracted to the ability to just have 4 players and really follow those at different points in the games, but also have a full roster if that's the strategic decisions you want to make. And there is a real excitement and effort because of the high risk reward of this decision you're making. If James Harden's worth 56 points to you and he's getting on the edge of going over or under, so he's going to make or break your roster, then ultimately that becomes a pretty exciting offer. And if you've already got it locked in, then you can switch over to watch someone else, particularly in the NBA or NFL, to really get that excitement going.
Okay, great. Anyone else? Nice job.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Well, thank you guys. Why don't we also call the rest of the finalists up to the stage? And judges, you have a very difficult decision to make, so I'm going to encourage you to start tallying up your answers. So Gregory, Della, Garrett, Patrick, Brad, and Robert, amazing job this morning. Why don't we give the finalists another round of applause? Each team continuously set the bar incredibly high as we proceeded through this presentation. I want to thank all of you in the audience as well for joining us this morning. I hope you enjoyed these presentations as much as I did, and were a lot of fun. And wanted to also just kind of remind everyone there's a lot of great events going on. But if you want to hear more from DraftKings, the DraftKings CEO Jason Robbins will be joined by A-Rod and Maverick Carter on a panel moderated by ESPN's Michelle Steele on what it takes to start a business in the sports industry. This panel will be at 5 p.m. in the Bill James room, and we all hope that you come and join us. So as our judges kind of continue to tally up the results, why don't we hear a little bit from the contestants? How do you guys feel? Yeah? Nice. What did you guys think of kind of each other's presentations? Obviously a very impressive group, and you guys took very different approaches.
I was very impressed with the primary research that the MIT team did, where they got their brands to really try it out. Something we would have liked to do with ours, but we thought we had to do ours on a massive scale to really understand the data implications and how things would play out, but doing it on a small beta test was really impressive.
Yeah, I liked how all the ideas were really different. Like the game formats were different, the sports were different. So I thought it was really cool to build.
Yeah, it was awesome seeing kind of the different directions, whether it be in youth sport, variations. It was very, very cool. So are you guys sweating yet? Excited to kind of... Yeah, for those of you in the audience, there's a countdown timer here that is kind of blaring in red. So. The judges are in deep deliberation right now. But I think they are ready to give an answer. So why don't we call the judges to the stage if they are almost ready? Jump the gun. Awesome. So why don't we call a few up?
Excellent. Everybody was excellent. Thanks again. So, wait, I was supposed to have Eliza was going to write up the... Somebody have the sheet. She's coming right up. Give us 1 second.
Yeah. So I guess while we're here, judges, what did you think overall?
Overall, very impressive. Some great presentations. Really impressed with the knowledge about DraftKings and the DFS game. So, yeah, very exciting. It's a tough decision for sure. All right. So, in third place, the UNC team. Second is U of Chicago. And the winner is MIT. Congratulations.